Hello and welcome to the Chromatic Podcast, where I bring you a fresh coat of innovation, ideas, and insights from top experts in business, arts, and culture. I'm your host, Craig Bundren of Bundren Painting, and the creator of the Bundren Building Arts Foundation. Today's colorful guest is Robert Curry. He's the president of CEO Results Coaching and the author of 3 books, From Red to Black, The Turnaround, and The Turnaround 2. Each one of these books showcases a company that he went in and did a turnaround on. The books are filled with great information that could help any business owner. The podcast today is outstanding. I loved every minute of my conversation with him. Be prepared to take a lot of notes, and let's cut right in and get rolling. Welcome, everybody, to the Chromatic Podcast. I'm Craig Bundren, your host and the founder of the Bundren Building Arts Foundation. Today, I'm very, very excited to bring on board Bob Curry. Bob Curry is an author, a coach, and a CEO. I've had several podcasts that I've done so far on art and community. Today's is about business, and I couldn't be more excited to do this. Bob is a turnaround specialist, and turnarounds have always excited me because if you've got a business that's in trouble, you have unhappy people, unhappy clients. There's a lot of stress involved, and Bob is the guy that comes in and helps you to see where the problems are in this business and can move the business forward and put it back on track to become basically what it was put there to be in the first place. So with all that, Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
I am so excited you're here. I know there's going to be a lot of good stuff. Bob you've got 3 books right now, correct?
Yes. The first one was From Red to Black. It was about a hurricane shutter company that was doing $3.5 million and lost about $800,000. And we were there for 6 months. They did $7 million in sales during that 6 months and made $1 million profit. The second book was called The Turnaround. And it was about a wholesale computer hardware software service distributor, actually in Exton, Pennsylvania. We went in at the beginning of December. They were doing $48 million and lost almost $1 million. And from December to September of the following year, 10 months later, we did $130 million in sales and made $4 million in profit. And the reason why I said September is because we sold it. It grew so much that the wholesaler that they were a franchise with bought the company back at a massive profit. The third one I'm in the process of publishing right now. It's called The Turnaround 2. It was a off-road supply company in Utah. I was there this past year. They went from doing about $6 million to now they're doing $12 million. They were having a tough time making payroll back then. And now the owner's pulling out hundreds of thousands of dollars.
and that makes for happy owners, definitely.
Yes.
I've read From Red to Black, and I need to read your second book, and obviously can't wait for the third. When I first got a hold of this book, it just reading through it as a small business owner, reading through it, I felt like it was pointing a finger directly at me, that it was singing my song, telling my story. There were so many things in there that rhyme with what was happening to us. I was so excited. And then some of the people that worked for me, I read a lot. They saw a book on my desk that talked about a turnaround. And so they started getting worried. There's what is this turnaround? Why do you have a book about a turnaround? Are we in trouble? And I told them, I said, no, it's not that we're in trouble, but this is a blueprint or exactly what you do to keep a business healthy. It doesn't necessarily have to be the turnaround. It's about keeping businesses healthy. These are the things that you must be doing. And when people don't do them or pay attention to the areas that you need to pay attention to, then someone like you has to come in and help them. I would like to come back to starting out for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you into doing this type of work.
I have an undergraduate degree in accounting and a master's in taxation. and I passed the CPA exam way back when, but I never kept it up because I don't plan on practicing accounting ever in my life. It's just the wrong side of the desk. But I started out in public accounting back when I graduated from college. You had to have 2 years experience to even sit for the exam. And I wanted to get it behind me because my goal was, when I was in college, is I wanted to be president of a $100 million company before I was 40 years old. And lucky enough, I did it. But I started out, got hired out of public accounting to be a controller. After 2 years, I was a 23-year-old controller for a $150 million wholesale distributor to drugstores. They sold everything in a drugstore except the drugs. And after being there 2 years, I got recruited to a retail toy company as controller. They were doing $130 million at the time. It was in Philadelphia. It was called Lionel Leisure Kitty City. I was there 8 years, ended up as chief financial officer, and learned a lot because all my peers were at least twice my age. And I worked very, very hard because I knew at my age, I didn't know it all. In fact, I knew very little. So my hard work made up for my lack of experience. I got recruited out of Lionel Leisure to be chief financial officer of a $300 million home builder commercial construction company. Craig, it was the best company I ever worked for in my life, by far. It had two owners that were God's gift to the business world. They hired the best people. They treated them well. They paid them well. They wouldn't let a person in that company unless they were top-notch. And I learned a ton from that.
It sounds like a fantastic place to work.
Oh, it was. And I ended up as chief financial officer, chief operating officer. So it was a platform for me that I could now sit the interview for the president of a company, to be the president of the company. Well, the construction company was bought by a national construction company because we had an amazing amount of land that they needed to build. So they paid a ton for our contracts, did not hire one person to work for the company. So basically I was on the street. But the good news was that when they paid a ton of money, half of it got distributed back to the employees. And the two others took their half. Yeah, it was by far the largest paycheck I ever got. I mean, it was a 7-figure paycheck.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had no trouble doing it. You guys made it. We're going to share it. It was just an incredible experience. I learned a ton. Well, I was going to take this big check and I was going to go I played golf in college, golf and basketball in college, on the college teams. So I was going to take a year and go golf all over the world. 4 days later, I was president of a computer company that was doing $48 million. It was my second book company that one of the banking friends that I had with the construction company. I had about $120 million of loans from Philadelphia banks. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of very good friends in the bank. So when they heard that I was on the street, I got a phone call saying, Bob, we have a company down the street from you and would like you to get involved. We know how you run a company. And we have a loan there that was really at risk. So I said, okay, I'll go see. I'll go talk to them. And they signed a contract for me to be president of the company. And when you read the book, you'll thoroughly enjoy it, I believe, because it's in the same format as my first book. And I owe my wife a lot of credit for my first book because I started writing about the first 100 pages. My goal in writing the books was to share my business information with hundreds and thousands of people. When I coach or when I do a turnaround or when I have a mastermind group, I'm only touching 50 people a year. But I thought if I write books, I can touch thousands of people with the information that I have from all the experiences.
Absolutely.
So I wrote about 100 pages in the first book, and my wife says, "Bob, this is terrible. This is really bad. It's boring." She says, "You're writing it like a textbook. Who the hell wants to read a business textbook?" She says, "Tell the stories from the turnaround." So From Red to Black is a true story about a hurricane shutter company that could get gazillion sales because everybody needed hurricane shutters on the east coast of Florida. So they could sell them, they just couldn't build them, install them.
Mm-hmm.
So I told stories about and just walked through the turnaround. Now, it was easy to do it, Craig, because during a turnaround that I'm working on, I document everything. I keep extensive notes on everything so that, well, I can't afford to mess up. There's very little money to pay me,
right,
because the company's losing money. So I have to go in there and make my own paycheck. And so everything's very well documented. Since it's so documented from the turnaround, it's well documented to write a true book about. So the second book, when I was invited into this company to run it, it was very interesting that there was 17 salespeople, 17 women. One woman did 55% of the total sales. The other 16 did the other 45%. So this turned around to me, like right up front, I said, gosh, this got to be very easy. If I can have one girl do 25 million and the balance of the company doing 23 million, I'll just figure out what she was doing and have them do the same thing. And that's what happened. It turned out to be extraordinarily successful turnaround.
You sent me a little write-up on that salesperson, and that was very interesting what you had documented during that. And I guess the plan, replicate and then get everyone else to do that, and then you've got an unstoppable forward momentum.
Yeah. The other thing that was substantial in that turnaround was when I got there were 20 service techs that would go out and do. This is right back when, 2000, when we were going from 1999 to 2000.
When the world was going to end before they knew about 2020.
Yeah. Everybody thought that everything was going to blow up in the computers because it went from 1999 to 2000.
Right.
So we had this service tech team that was horrendous. I mean, I couldn't imagine sending out techs 100% of the time and losing money. So we ended up really testing their skills, and 10 of them lived through it. And then knowing that I had a service tech manager that would hire bad talent, I replaced him. And I replaced him with another superstar. And he brought in additional 20 people. And the service department was just incredibly profitable. So I had two superstars in that company. One was the service technician, or the service manager, and the other one was, her name was Nancy. So I just spread Nancy's skills over the other 16 people, and we grew the company to 130 million from 48 in 9 months.
Amazing. So your first turnaround was almost accidental. I mean, you just kind of walked into it. So you get this big payout from the first company, and then a bank, which that says a lot. A bank reaches out and says, "Hey, we're scared about this company. We need you to step in here and protect our asset." And so I guess that sets you on a lifelong venture of stepping in and protecting people's assets.
Yes. Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned to me, I'm reading Rockefeller's biography right now, and it talks about that he did the accounting, and then he was taking over these businesses at 23, and he said he would be worth $100,000 one day. And so hearing you come through, and you were accounting, and you had you wanted to be worth X amount at one day, it's very similar and on my mind because I'm reading it. But there's a lot of people that are uber successful at business that come from accounting backgrounds that decided not to do accounting anymore, but be what you put on the other side of the desk. So when you come into these, the numbers are so important in a business. Do you start with the numbers? Do you start with the culture of the business? Because you address it all in your books. And you addressed a lot of the culture because you come in there and evaluate the team. But give me a little bit of the thought of what goes in your head when you go in there, and maybe it's all at once, maybe it's separated, but how do you attack those when you go in?
I think, Craig, that God gave me this gift that I could look at your financial statements and literally in a half an hour know every single problem in your company without even meeting the people. Looking at the margin, look at your payroll expense trends, looking at your sales trends. And so I can understand your income statement, your balance sheet like that, and figure out where's the problem. Now, I always aggressively go after the low-hanging fruit first because I always like getting paid for my work. So I've always figured that if I go save you what I've always told everybody as a client is, so Craig, if I give you $8, would you give me $1 back? If I improve your business by $800,000, would you be comfortable with me charging you a $100,000 fee? Mm-hmm. And actually, it's 9-1 because I guarantee you the 800 after my fees. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I figure out where's the low-hanging fruit so I can fix that and improve the cash flow. But the number one thing that I do while I'm doing that is interview the management team and find the weakness. Yet 100% of the time, there's one or two weak managers that the owner doesn't have the chutzpah or doesn't pull his head out of the ground to fix his own problems. I did a turnaround of a paper manufacturer in Lawrence, Massachusetts one time. The treasurer of the company put together a team and bought the company from the owners that owned the company for 70 years. The company was doing 110 million and was making 2 or 3 million in profit. But they ended up raising 5 million and borrowed 5 million to buy the company for 10 million. He brought all his friends in, so they had 13 vice presidents in the company.
Wow.
And the company only had one product. It was hanging file folders. And they had only one customer. It was Smead. So after they bought it, the company went from like 3 million down to break even after 1 year. And then they were losing on a run rate to lose $1.5 million. And then they brought me in. Well, I interviewed the management team, and like 3 of the managers walked in and says, "Bob, I know I shouldn't be here. So what do I do?" They had a vice president of finance, they had a CFO, they had a treasurer, they had an accounting manager. I got rid of 3 of them. I ended up firing 9 on Black Friday. It was a Friday after Thanksgiving. 9 vice presidents. Wow. Got rid of $2 million of payroll. Immediately, the company was profitable. So to answer your question, a long-winded answer to your question is, I interview the management team, find the weakness. And then after I find the weakness, I go in and see how the weakness spread through the department. whether it be the finance or operations or sales or any of the departments, then I fix them. As I'm fixing other things to improve cash flow, grow sales, and pay my consulting fees.
You and I were speaking a little bit earlier, and we mentioned Tony Robbins. I went to a Tony Robbins event called Business Mastery. I was trying to learn some things about business that I didn't know and I needed to learn. And one of the first things that he said is the biggest chokehold on every business is the owner. If you're the owner, you're the problem. And obviously I took offense to that, and then I let it sit in for a while, and then realized that that's a very true statement. And what you're putting out there, as a business owner, we fail to see the problems that are right in front of us with management or the decisions we're making, or not firing that person that needs to be let go, or not making this move or that move, and just hoping things fix themselves. I've heard people respond to it as you're out there smoking hopium and seeing if it'll make a change.
Yeah, hope's not a strategy.
Right, exactly. So I imagine that it's quite difficult to deal with owners, but I imagine by the time that they get to you, they realize that there's something vitally wrong, and they're probably a little bit more apt to do things.
Let me tell you that by the time they sign my contract, they know my contract basically says that right now I'm running the company, and you're going to stand right next to me and watch what I do. But since you couldn't make the tough decisions to fix the problems, like having a strong management team, or good financial reporting, or good operational reporting, or a strong sales manager that creates a good commission program that trains the salespeople, that forces them to get out in front of the correct targets that you want to sell to, I will do that. And then once I turn this company around, I'm turning it back to you, and you got to do the same things. Most of my contracts with the company owner is after I fix the company and make it profitable, then they pay me for additional year, just one day, so that I see the financial statements. We have face-to-face meetings over Zoom to say, explain to me all the problems you have now. Mm-hmm. Okay? And let's fix those too, because change is hard to do. I don't want them changed back to the old way where they were losing money. So I babysit them for a year, or let's say support them in their decision-making for a year.
And that was going to be another one of my questions. So when you went to, you mentioned Utah earlier, when you go to Utah to work on a business, do you basically live in Utah for 6 to 8 months, or do you travel back and forth?
No, when I was in Utah, I was doing an engagement in Houston, one in Dallas, and one in Layton, Utah. So in a matter of 3 weeks, over 2-week period, I spend 4 days each at those locations.
This one I know is going to be an astounding answer, I'm sure. So how many companies have you turned around in your career?
It's over 75, but not 80 yet.
That is amazing. That's very exciting for the fact that you helped that many people with their problem, or that you were able to teach that many people how to run their business. It's got to be a very internally fulfilling thing.
It really is. I'll tell you, I took over a company in New Jersey. There was a wholesale distributed convenience store. When I took them over, they were doing $475 million. And 2 years later, they were doing $1.4 billion. And we were going to buy another company. I took it over as the president and CEO of the company. We just naturally grew it from 475 million to $1.2 billion it was. in a 2-year period. And then we were going to buy a company that was doing 800 million to get it to 2 billion. And that was going to be my exit, that we were going to take it public. They had locations in Morristown, New Jersey, Hauppauge, Long Island, and Mansfield, Massachusetts. We were buying a company in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that was the exact same business. And they ended up buying us, which worked out for me because for some reason I just hated that company. They sold $800 million of cigarettes, and I had never had a cigarette in my life. I was happy I turned the company around. It was extraordinarily successful. It was a extraordinarily financial rewarding and personal success for me, but I hated selling cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very understandable. I find so many people go out there and there's a lot of people that buy companies and try to flip them, basically improve them and go. But the way that you're doing sounds so much more intriguing for the fact that you just get to step in and help somebody out and then, exit when you have your exit plan.
The exciting thing for me is, and I'm very serious about this, it's not work for me. I go in and I just have so much passion about this that, I can meet this owner and a week later I'm working at the company and he looks like a stressed mess when I start. And when I finish, he's out riding ski mobiles, having fun with his family. And recovered his initial investment on the deal. And I mean, it is, and that's true. That's very true. I mean,
I'm laughing a little bit on the inside because I would almost bet that you are an outstanding marriage counselor as well, because if you take that stress level off somebody, I guarantee you that their marriage is going to greatly improve.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've had probably over 100 meetings with the spouse of my client because I need her endorsement too.
Mm-hmm.
And my conversation usually is with the spouse. Listen, Bill's going to be working very hard and he's going to be doing a lot of very stressful things. And so I really hope that I can call upon you that when he comes home, you are a stress release rather than an increaser of stress, so that he can focus on his business and get it profitable. And I guarantee if it's profitable, he'll be a lot more relaxed at home and life at home will be a lot less stressful. It's been very successful because if I have, the husband and wife both on my team helping to do my work, it's a lot easier.
I think so many people don't realize how much their spouse is involved in their business. Like my wife is not a part of my business, but she is a temperature gauge for whatever's going on in there, because there's so many times that she comes to me and goes, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing? You are so stressed out right now, or do you realize what's going on?" And a lot of times will kind of grab my head and forcibly make me look the other way. Look out here. And it may not be something that I want to hear, but she's very honest, and I need that honesty. Much like what you said about your wife, she read the first part of the book and said, "No, you're not going to do that." My wife has done the same thing for me many, many times, and it's that open and honest direction. And being a business owner, this makes me think about that. There's nobody to tell you that you're wrong. As a business owner, the bank can come back and say, "We have a bit of a problem," but nobody's slapping your hand and going, "You can't do that."
Being the president of a company is the loneliest job in the world.
It is.
Especially if you have your son and your brother and your uncle working in the company, because they'll use your problems as weapons against you.
I think family businesses, and I come from a family business. I run a business that my dad started, and I knew so much more than my dad when I was younger, and I was going to go out and I was going to prove. And then when I took the company over, I went and I jumped out there to prove to him what I could do, and I made some horrible mistakes. Some horrible mistakes, and it cost a lot of money to fix those mistakes, and made me turn around and say to myself, okay, I don't know as much as I think I do. I need to go out and increase my knowledge. But I think having a family business adds a layer of difficulty to it that most people don't understand.
Absolutely. I am probably the luckiest guy in the world. My wife is president of a 5-campus, very successful college, and has been for 30 years. And she's brilliant, she's warm, she's kind, she's extraordinarily intelligent. She's very good to me, that I can go home and say, oh my gosh, you aren't going to believe what Bill did this. She says, well, have you thought about this? She has been my sounding board for many, many of my turnarounds, that has been, as valuable to me as she was with my books.
Mm-hmm.
Just amazing.
I feel the same about my wife 90% of the time.
I can understand that.
She likes to pick on me equally as much. Do you have an area that you see with businesses where a common thread, or where most of them are getting in trouble? I know we discussed owners not taking control of what they need to do, and maybe bad management. Is there anything else that's a glowing thing to you when you walk into a business?
Yes, that they're working too much in their business and not on their business. And what that means is they're the man. They're the ones, they're the people that point in that direction and say, we're taking the business that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that we can take it that way is if the owner manages his management team to go that direction. If he's not doing that, then sales are going that direction, operations are going there, finance is going there, IT is going there. And then so that none of it is working like this. I think that's the biggest problem. Craig, I've worked on wholesale distributors, convenience stores, wholesale computers, a farm, a massive farm, a headhunter, $100 million headhunter, paper manufacturer, 3 law firms, engineering firms, 2, every kind of business that you can imagine. They're all the same problems. Mm-hmm. Management problems. A lot of people have asked me, Bob, do you have a special area? Yeah, it's business. I work on businesses, and I work on management teams of businesses to get them all pulling the rope in the same direction. If you and your team are all pulling that rope in the same direction, it's amazing what you can do. That your weaknesses might be your sales guy's strengths, or it might be your operations guy's strengths, okay? So that if you have a management team, senior management team of 5 players, they should have, it would be the owner's responsibility to make sure that he has a team that covers everything, that has somebody that's an expert in every area of the business.
That's very exciting to me, because I think that there's so many business, and I'm going to go with small business owners. There's so many small business owners out there that think they have to know everything and they have to be able to do everything. And I think that attributes to that working in their business. I have to go out there and I have to make all the contacts. I have to make the sales. I have to make sure that we do this. We're going to bid these jobs. We're going to get this. And they don't realize that I can be horrible at this as long as I have a management team member that
Yes.
is really good at it.
Yes.
And I think people beat themselves up. Well, I'm not good at that, so we're not going to make it here. We're not going to do that. But if you put the right player in the right seat, to use that term that everyone uses, then you can thrive. I'm not perfect at everything. I'm not perfect at anything, but I can still succeed by putting the right people in there.
Here's the other key thing that is very important. I know when I was running a $1 billion business that I needed timely, accurate financial statements, that I needed to know where my balance sheet was. And that's what a lot of business owners don't understand, the value of a balance sheet. They don't understand the value of watching your gross profit percentage or watching your inventory, how much inventory you have, because my Utah company had about 3 times too much inventory. And what that caused was all his money was in inventory. And if he would have reduced the inventory by $500,000, he would add $500,000 to use in the operation of sales and the rest of the company. But in the meantime, he had all this inventory, and it's all slow-moving inventory that really, really hurt him. So I broke the pencil of the purchasing department, said, you aren't restocking one item there for at least $500,000 from now. And all of a sudden, we got a whole bunch of money in the bank. And the benefit of that is we start doing deals with our vendors and getting better terms and getting better prices for our vendors. And then all of a sudden, our margins start going up.
And I remember you addressing working with the vendors in the book. One of the things that you mentioned, and I go a lot from my own experience, was the balance sheet and the P&L. I didn't pay attention to those as much as I should have in the beginning. One, I didn't completely understand them, and I was too embarrassed to tell somebody that I didn't understand them. And two, there's a little line that says profit. And I thought as long as I read that number and that number was good, that I'm good. And
no.
Right. And it comes to find out that I was wrong at that point. And I had to learn to read the balance sheet and find out what my cash flow was and start changing these. But like so many other business owners, I had two things that I could do. And that was make more sales and try to grow the business. If we get bigger, if we make more sales, that's all I knew. Okay, we're losing money now, then we need to increase sales. And I'm just yanking on that lever all the time, and I'm pushing my team, make more sales. I'm not telling them how to make more sales. I'm just saying this is what we've got to do and expecting them to do it. And I had a hard lesson coming my way, and I got slapped around with it and learned. But I think that there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that there's so many things that you're talking about. And once again, it's well defined in your book. So to go in there and lower your inventory, that's one lever. What other levers, and especially during a time of now, during a pandemic with everything going on, what are the levers that people should be pulling and paying attention to try to survive this time?
In the book, I describe what I call weekly flash report. And I have every one of my clients' controller prepare this weekly flash report, and it's on the owner's desk at noon every Monday, without exception. It has the cash, a recap of the cash, beginning balance, receipts, expenditures, ending balance as of Sunday. If they have a line of credit, it's beginning of the line, pay downs, drawdowns, ending balance. Then you have a line of your accounts receivable broken down into current receivables, 1 to 30 days late, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, over 90. And as a percentage of the total there, 4 weeks of it. So you can look at your receivables and say, oh, I got $100,000 in my over 90. Holy crap, that's a problem. Okay. Right. And then you can see, oh, it's gone from 180, 160, 120, 100. Well, it's trended correct, but I still need that 100 in my checking account. You know what receivables are, Craig?
What's that?
That's your cash in somebody else's checking account.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's very inconvenient.
Yes. It's hard to pay your bills when the money's in somebody else's checking account.
That's like trying to pay bills with profit.
Yeah. So then the next line is payables. Same thing, 4 weeks broken down into each payables. So I can look at your cash, your receivables, your aged receivables, your aged payables. And if the payables are like over 90, over 60 and everything, I know I got a problem there. Then the next line is sales broken down into different categories. In your category, in yours, it might be, your big guys, reoccurring guys, whatever you have, but it would show 4 weeks of trends. Okay. And then the next line is payroll, broken down into management, administration, operations, sales, and then total. Both dollars and headcount.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see sales are going down and payrolls going up, or headcount is going up, I know there's a problem.
Right.
It's just, and just to, I watch payroll extremely careful. I watch payroll every single day that I'm doing a turnaround. 99% of the time, it's at least 75% of your expenses. So if I can fix 75% of my expenses by losing 2 people that aren't doing a good job, okay, I can get to break even very quickly.
Gotcha.
And then the last item is purchases and inventory. So I can see purchase orders out there, sales orders, and then my inventory levels.
Is this an Excel sheet that you get basically and you said on Mondays?
Yes. So when I see this sheet of paper, Craig, I know everything about my company. I don't even need to see the financial statements because I have all the key information. If I'm controlling and reacting to the problems on this weekly flash report,
mm-hmm.
when I get my financial statement 10 days after the close of the month, I already know what it's going to look like. I know that either I had a good month or a bad month, but if I had a bad month, I know I fixed 10 things that I won't have another bad month.
Right.
So one of the first things that I do when I go into a company is I implement this flash report, because then I know exactly where the company is on a weekly basis as a turnaround guy.
So for the people that are suffering right now, it's get clarity on exactly where your business is, and then you can decide what levers that you need to either cut inventory or collect receivables, whichever item's going to be most beneficial, versus just pulling the profit lever or the sales lever.
Yes, a lot of people are hurting sales right now. So if I'm running a $12 million company, and because of the coronavirus, I'm annualizing now 10 million, I don't need that whole list of employees. But I have to go back there and reduce those operating expenses to a $10 million company rather than a $12 million company.
I think that's a very, very good point, because there's a lot of people that are running companies and they are a $12 million company that's doing 9 now, yes, or 8, and thinking that, well, we're just going to push through this. And at some point, the market's going to bear us being a $12 million company again, but we don't know when that's going to happen.
I had my finance department give me certain calculations of sales per employee. So if I'm looking that my sales per employee is 100,000 and all of a sudden my sales per employee is 80,000, I know I got a problem.
Right.
And if I have a problem, I got to react to it in payroll and other areas that I can reduce the costs.
That's some very, very good information. This is going to be one of the podcasts that I have to go back and listen to and start taking some notes where I can use some of this information as well. What was the hardest turnaround that you had to do? Has that been in any of the books, or is that one that's the one that just still sits in your mind?
One of the hardest was a headhunter for a recruiting company that was doing $100 million was owned by two guys. One was operations and one was sales. And the sales guy died. And all of a sudden, the company went from 100 million to 60 million. They were out of Massachusetts, and they had offices in Houston, San Diego, and one other California company where Martin Marietta was. They recruited aerospace engineers for like the 3 or 4 largest airline, Boeing, Martin Marietta, those companies. So I knew that I had to replace my sales guy, and because the operations guy was all about computers. I mean, if you're a headhunter, they have extensive computer operations. Their computer operations was in Las Vegas. They had headquarters in Massachusetts where they did not have one sale. They didn't have one customer. And they spent $2.5 million in headquarters and had 4 remote locations. And all the management was here, and the remote locations weren't being supervised. So I spent like 2 weeks in Massachusetts, and then I flew out and spent a week in each one of those locations. I literally got rid of about 70% of the people in Massachusetts. I closed down that office and called San Diego our new headquarters, and had the principal and his 2 daughters relocate to California to run the company. And then we hired a competitor, senior vice president of sales from a competitor, to turn the company around. And it took a year to get it back up to 100 million. But that was, I think, the biggest one that I wasn't sure when I started with the company how I was going to do it. Mm-hmm. It didn't come to me until after I visited the 4 locations of what all was wrong with this company. There's no management out there, and all the management's over here on the eastern side of the United States, and all operations are on the western side. That just seems silly to me. Mm-hmm. It was difficult to get to that because there was a lot of talent in Massachusetts, but they weren't in the face of the worker bees. I remember laying in bed thinking, how am I going to fix this? And then finally it was, I got to get superstars on the western half of the United States.
I imagine also it's I don't want to use the word easy, but it's to be able to turn a company around when you don't have the psychological involvement of it being your baby that you started. And I think people that are so entwined in it often have trouble looking out of the hole that they've put themselves in.
I'll tell you another difficult time that I had recently was 2 of my very recent clients. The companies were started by a father, and the son came into the business. And the father was trying to turn over the company to the son, but he was doing it like, here, oh, here, no, here, no, here. And in fact, my wife says, that should be my book, my next book, about writing a book about if you're going to turn the business over to your son, here's how you do it.
I think that would be perfect. Speaking from experience and going through things like that, absolutely. I think that would be a fantastic book.
These 2 fathers were a royal pain in the butt. I mean, they were old school. They didn't want any change. The technology wasn't important to them. It was, and their wives were involved, which was a disaster. And so finally, I had to say, listen, I'm going to buy you dinner tonight. You and I are going out to dinner. You are going to stay out of John's face now. And if you're going to turn the company over to him, then you have to turn over the authority to run the company. You can support him, but he has to be the decision maker. He has to make the mistakes. He has to fix his mistakes. You can support him, you can coach him, but you can no longer make the decisions. He has to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And most important, his management team has to know that he is the authority. When he says you do it, they aren't going to father and say, listen, Johnny wants me to do this.
I can identify. I can greatly identify.
Yeah.
So how many clients do you work with? I know now that you do coaching and help people out. So how many clients do you work with at a time?
Well, this pandemic has, right now we're in the process of selling this college. So I am extraordinarily focused on bringing this to the settlement table. But normally, let's say a year ago, I would have 2 or 3 turnarounds going on and probably coaching 6 or 7 business owners on top of that, having Zoom meetings for an hour or 2 to coach them about all the problems they're having. I have a client who's one of my favorite. It's a 40-year-old gentleman and his 38-year-old sister who was given a company from their father to run. The company does $65 million and making $18 million after-tax profit. So they read my book, and I'm very lucky they actually live down the street here, came over to college to see me. And so we talked, and he hired me. And I said, John, why would you hire me? He goes, Bob, we're making a ton of money. I want to keep making that money. You're my insurance policy that I'm not going to make any big errors. You're going to keep me out of trouble. I don't care what you charge me. I care about you being passionately involved in my company, that I don't take it from 65 to 50 and from $18 million profit down to 0. Mm-hmm. What a great coaching engagement that is.
That sounds like it. So really, you are or aren't continuing doing coaching?
Oh, I will coach forever.
Okay.
I will coach forever.
And many more books?
I love it.
More books in your future?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe we'll have this college change of ownership done in the next 2 months. And after that, 1 book a quarter. Knock on wood.
Well, I read your book and I know that I'm better for it. And I look forward to reading your other books. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you? We'll definitely put all of this in the show notes afterwards, but what's the best way?
My email address is Bob, like my first name, at CEO, like Chief Executive Officer, RSC, which is my initials, Robert Samuel Curry.com. And in the past 2 weeks, I've received emails from people that have read my books or read my articles from England, from South Africa, from Brazil, Argentina, Australia, asking business questions. I get up usually at about 5 a.m. That's the first thing I do is go and answer emails. Mm-hmm. They're all about business, and I just it gives me great excitement thinking that I'm helping somebody in Africa run their business.
This is your passion about it comes out in the interview. It comes out in the books. I am so thankful that you agreed to come on here and do this. And I'm so excited to read your next books. I have a strange feeling that I'm going to be keeping in close contact with you after this. So I just really want to thank you for coming on here and sharing all this knowledge about business with us and turnarounds.
Well, I seriously appreciate the opportunity because, Craig, I love what I do. I truly love what I do. And spending an hour on the podcast with you, it just gives me goosebumps.
Me as well. Like I said, I'm very excited, and there's a lot of people that I know I try to talk business with that could care less about it, and I kind of geek out on it. So it's really fun to talk to someone that's so passionate. So once again, thank you so much, Bob, for being on here. And everybody else, thank you for listening. We'll have ways to contact Bob and maybe some things in the show notes that you can read that he's put out. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the Chromatic Podcast. You can learn more about what we're up to by visiting Bundren.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and rate and review it. Join us next week for more insights on business, arts, and culture.